how many sanitizer bottles do we have, and which entrances we're going to be using, and how many bubbles we're going to have, and in terms of making sure that we meet the safeguarding and health and safety guidelines. There's a lot of work that goes into this, and this is all important and it's relevant and it's needed. But sometimes what happens in amidst all of this, we forget the purpose of why we actually set off on the journey. Sometimes a person can be traveling and he's a traveler and he sees, mashallah, beautiful scenery on the way, and he is taken back by some of the events that take place whilst on his journey, and he forgets that actually he's got a destination to reach. So it's important that we remind ourselves, and mashallah, all of you have been teaching, and alhamdulillah, we've been in this environment, and I'm sure all of you are fully acquainted with what the Maktab role is and what the objectives are. But as a way of recap and revision, inshallah, I'll just like to share some thoughts with you, inshallah. So, one of you have the presentation there, or?
Yeah.
So this is a very short and brief presentation that we put together over the last few years that we've been teaching. And we've tweaked it as we've gone along in terms of based on our experience and based on the fact that, okay, what is it that our ulama and scholars and our ustads are saying in terms of what the purpose of maktabs are and what maktab should be focusing on. So the first slide, which you can see there, it has our maktab logo on it. But in terms of understanding and having some kind of awareness, what's important is to understand and focus on that middle part of the slide, which is Iqra bismi rabbik. And the most important message that we gain from this is that we, in order for us to truly have a connection with Iqra, we have to have connection with Bismi Rabbik. Okay, so our true teacher is the one who is connected with Bismi Rabbik, and then he's able to do Iqra. And this is very, very important for all of us, because even now, with a lot of research that's gone on in spiritual well-being and mindfulness and healthy living, one of the things that they are finding, and the research is finding, is that your students or your clients or your patients will inherit your spiritual state, your mood, your sympathy and empathy, and what's actually running through you. And more evidence is coming to light to suggest this. So the first thing, respected brothers and sisters and ulama and alimas, is that Iqra bismi rabbik is a very foundational, important part of our makatib, that if we are truly connected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then the chances are that inshallah our students will inherit this. The next slide, it basically goes on to talk about what is the holistic picture of where we want our children to be. So we know that the children are Amanah. وَكُلُّكُمْ مَسْئُولٌ عَنْ رَعِيَّتِهِ, and we are going to be questioned about this Amanah, because at the end of the day, the parents are dropping their children off 4:30, 5 o'clock for 2 hours, 3 hours, under our care, under our supervision. We have a very powerful position where we are. In them 2 hours and 2.5 hours, we have complete authority in terms of how we are able to condition, to purify, to rectify, to strengthen, motivate the minds and hearts of these children. So it's an Amanah, and we've got to get them to the level of Ubudiyyah. That's the first thing. And when we talk about Ubudiyyah, how does this translate itself in the 24 hours of life and 7 days a week? Is that they're able to live as a servant of Allah and as a Muhammadi. These are two things that are the ultimate objective of any Dini organization, be it Tasawwuf, be it Tazkiyah, be it Dawat or Tabligh, be it Ta'lim or Ta'allum. Whatever Dini sphere we look at, the end goal of it is that a person is able to become Abd. He's actually a servant of Allah, and he's living as a Muhammadi, he's living as an Ummati of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So these children that are going to go into high school and then college and university, and they're going to get jobs and careers and move on, and they're going to become fathers and brothers and husbands and grandparents at one time. In every sphere and phase of their life, we need to ensure that they are empowered with the principles and the roots on which they can base their ubudiyah, and at all times they are able to connect back and say, you know, mashallah, my ustad was really good. My maktab experience was really good. I learned this dua in maktab. I learned this in madrasa. I learned this. I learned this. And they are able to have a framework in which they are able to present themselves as a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that they're always conscious of this. As humans, we're going to make mistakes, and we all do. You know, kullukum khatta'un. All of us are people who make mistakes, but the best of us are the ones who realize, who have a guilty conscience, who have the nafs lawama, the lamenting nafs, which rectifies us and it kind of admonishes us and says, look, you are a believer, you have iman, you've got to make a U-turn here. As long as our students have this consciousness, inshallah, their iman will be safeguarded. And that's when our students become sadaqah jariyah for us. Okay, what we don't want them to become is a burden for us, because we know, you know, we talk about experiences and how people have benefited from Makatib Madaris for many, many centuries and years, especially in the UK from the 1960s, late 1960s, early 1970s, when the first masajid actually began to have some kind of learning halaqah with them. Alhamdulillah, we've been fortunate to have Madaris and Makatib up and down the country, which are able to act as a very important tool in the preserving of the iman of the children and our own. Many a times we come across ulama and asatiza and maktab teachers who openly say, Wallah sahab, if it wasn't for maktab, I don't know what I'd do. There is no other dini khidmat that I'm able to do other than teaching in maktab. Not everybody can go into imamat. Not everybody goes into chaplaincy. Not everybody goes into different other spheres of dini khidmat. But maktab is such a common and such a wide, generally recognized concept in our country that alhamdulillah, ulama and alimas up and down the country are able to fit themselves in, slot themselves in into some kind of maktab environment. And in return, what the maktab does, it preserves our deen, our iman, our akhlaq, and we have to be conscious that, oh, I'm a teacher, I have to have something to offer. If the water in the well is pure, then everybody's going to benefit from that, inshallah. And this is why the fundamental and the first step to be able to build that relationship with our students and ensure that they inherit the correct thing from us is the statement of Imam Yusuf rahmatullah, in which he said, the bond of the student and teacher should be such that if a stranger were to walk in your class, he would feel that it's your own child that you are teaching. Sometimes we can actually do a test on this, where you have a class of students and you have your own child in that class. If our attitude in addressing, reprimanding, rewarding, cautioning is different to the other students in comparison to our own, then there needs to be some homework. Yes, naturally, there's a biological connection and something which we are not held responsible for. The inner emotions are beyond our control. But in terms of adl and insaf and fairness and applying the same classroom rules and behavior management rules and engagement rules for all the students should be on the same level. That if somebody was to walk into the class, they would imagine and they would take it as this is his own child. The compassion, the akhlaq, the politeness, this is all very, very important. That is the ultimate foundation. The next slide, we go on to mention and talk about what the syllabus actually looks like. Okay, so many a times when we first began our maktab journey, I'm talking about back in the in 2000, late 1990s, there was a concept that maktab was about Quran, kalima, and namaz. That as long as you know some Quran, you know some kalimas and namaz, you should be all right, and the maktab is doing his job. And as we've grown in maktab and as we've consulted our scholars and ulama, what we began to realize and what we now have achieved is actually the maktab syllabus is conclusive of the 5 branches of our faith. So our Maktab syllabus should offer ibadat, muasharat, akhlaq, muamalat, and imaniyat. All of this at some level should be included in our teaching strategy. It doesn't have to be a syllabus topic. It doesn't have to be a subject. It doesn't have to be that the management has given us a kitab to teach it. It could be that we have a structure and a recognized syllabus that's fine. But above and beyond that, we as individual teachers and staff, through the approval of the management, if we can introduce elements which strengthen imaniyat, which strengthen muasharat and muamalat and akhlaq and ibadat, then we should be creative, positive, and have enough energy within us to bring the idea, to bring to the forefront, and to share that good practice so others are able to benefit. But that can only be done, like, mashallah, the ulama will know that our stars used to say that focus on the matan, don't get lost in the hashia. Meaning that whatever the syllabus we have in front of us and the core subject we've got to teach, we've got to ensure that's delivered at a very good standard before we begin to look at extracurricular activity. We must ensure that the core is safe, that the base is safe. And once the base is safe, we can then look at extracurricular and look at other things which strengthen what we already have in place. But in essence, the 5 branches of faith is what our maktab and our syllabus and our teaching strategy should be offering. The next slide, we go on to talk about the relevance of this in terms of when we look at it from a tarbiyyah perspective. Okay, so sometimes we can look at tarbiyyah as a extra tool. Okay, so you've got maybe imaniyat, ma'ashat, ma'amalat, akhlaq, and then you've got tarbiyyah as well. So it is something which is a subject matter in itself and needs to be given attention as something which sits isolated and separate, so that the right attention and the right focus can be given to that. But more important than this is Mufti Mahmud Hassan Gangohi rahmatullah writes in his Malfuzat, and he says, innamal akhlaqu bil ahwal la bit ta'allum. That tarbiyyah is something which is inherited and is seldom taught. So depending on the tarbiyyah of the teacher, depending on the tarbiyyah of the parent, and depending on the ethos and the culture of the maktab, this is where the student will get his tarbiyyah from. So if you've got values such as enter the building with salam, walk to the right hand side, make sure we speak politely, anybody we see we give salam, everything we do with the right. As long as we have a culture in our maktab and every student is conditioned, this is what our deen and Quran teaches us, Sibghat Allah, aman ahsanu min Allahi sibgha. As Hafiz Sahib rahmatullah used to mention this all the time, that our deen is sibgha. We have to color ourselves and make our tarbiyyah in the colors of the deen. And when our children and students begin to see this, they're seeing it in the teacher, they're seeing it in the parents, it's an ethos and a culture in the maktab, automatically that tarbiyyah will be done, inshallah. So what does that tell us? That we have to make effort on our staff. So we have to allocate time in set days, which are conclusive of strategy and theory, but also have an element of focus on how is our staff going to build its spirituality, its ruhaniyah. Do they have a connection with spiritual mentor? Is our Quran being recited daily? Our tasbihat being done? Are the ulama, the namaz in the masjid? Is fajr in the masjid taking place? Is our akhlaq and our fara'id and wajibat, are they in their place? Not just in huquq Allah, but in huquq al-ibad. And we should be very open and transparent in sharing that. Because at the end of the day, the success of the maktab relies on me and you. That there needs to be thought given to this and strategies in place to empower. Then we will see, inshallah, that the tarbiyyah of the children will automatically fall in place. So if you have to make tarbiyyah of the parents, how do we do this? This is why maktab is just one piece of the jigsaw. We have to connect the parents with the ulama, with the dini institutes and programs. Do they have a sheikh? Do they have a spiritual mentor? Do they have a routine of a'mal? Okay. something that we have to oversee. Can we take the deen from the children to the parents? They're taking nursery rhymes home. They are taking quizzes and puzzles from school home. So can the children take the deen from the maktab to the homes? Yes, they can. And one of the most powerful ways of doing this is storytelling. When we present our deen on the back of storytelling, this is something which the children very quickly are able to grapple with, and they actually are interested to go home, and first thing they want to do is tell their mom and dad that my Ustadji, my Maulana, he said this today. He told us this story. So indirectly, your deen is reaching the home. The tarbiyyah of the parent is being done. Sometimes when the children recite with tajweed at home, so all you say to the student, beta, today when you go home, I like you to read this sabak to your mother or your father once only. When that child recites that 1 page, half page with tajweed, with makharij, this is the kitab of Allah at the end of the day. When he recites that 1 page with the mother and father, inshallah, the penny will drop. It will have an effect. It will have its colors. At the same time, what we don't want to do is burden the children with so much homework that their maktab experience becomes something which they detest and something which they struggle with, and they don't enjoy coming to maktab because the element of homework is too much for them. So the balance is important. So we move on to the next slide, inshallah. And here, when we're talking about tarbiyyah and we talk about, you know, how the children are going to advance, like I said before, the question we need to ask is, what is my spiritual state? Remember, in the Quran, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. The people of ilm, when they've inherited the ilm, which is the inheritance of the Anbiya, what comes with it is everything else, the whole package. So Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam was not just the pinnacle of ilm, he was also an example for the people of ilm, and the people of ilm have to be example for the rest of us. So whatever level of ilm we have attached to us, that needs to be seen in our akhlaq, our character, and that's why our spiritual state is very, very important. So inshallah, if we have tahajjud, we have ishraq, awabin, duha, we have the faraid and wajibat in place, we are fulfilling our huquq al-ibad, we are people of sadaqah and charity, and people who spend in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, we were fundraising once for our madrasa here, and you know, we came across a few challenges, and a very senior alim from Pakistan was visiting. So he heard of our institute and the madrasa, and he actually asked one of his hosts that was hosting him that I want to speak to so and so. So he mentioned my name. So I went to see the Maulana, and we sat down, and mashallah, he gave a lot of words of encouragement and motivation, because our main focus is the youth alongside the maktab. And one thing he said was, he said, look, and he said it in obviously Urdu speaking alim, so I'll say it in Urdu and I'll just brief it in English. He said, देखो, अगर आप चाहते हैं कि अल्लाह की तरफ से रहमत आए, अगर आप चाहते हैं अल्लाह की तरफ से नुसरत और मदद आए, तो आपकी मिसाल उस बच्ची की तरह होनी चाहिए जो माँ की गोद में है. And he goes, अगर बच्चा रोता रहेगा तो माँ के छाती में दूध आता रहेगा, और अगर बच्चे ने रोना बंद कर दिया तो माँ के छाती में दूध भी बंद हो जाएगा. So he said, look, if you want help to come from Allah, if you're wanting funds and money to come to your institute and to your masjid and madrasa to strengthen you and fulfill your needs and fulfill your requirements, then you're going to have to keep crying. Because the day you stop crying, that's the day that the treasures on the doors of Allah will also close. You know, our elders say, they say now before ever, more than ever, that one of the things that we lack today is we lack crying for ourselves and for the ummah. And that's something that we must focus on. Our own spiritual state is something which is going to be very, very important. So this is something, inshallah, should be an agenda item for all of us on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, and something that we have as part of our CPD and staff development, so that all of us have targets that we can meet and work towards, inshallah. On the next slide, we then go on to mention what is it, where does our spiritual state start? What are the fundamental rules or the principles for this? There's three things that we find in the writings of the ulama. The first thing is husn niyat. Why am I in the maktab? I am in the maktab for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm not there for Mullah Huzaifa. I'm not there for any other vice principal, principal, or trustees or management. I am here for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And because I'm here for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the mutalaba and the requirement from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that He loves the believer when he does something, he does it to his ahsan state. Ahsanu amala. So because I'm doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, my deed is like my namaz. The hadith mentions some namaz is like what? That a person reads, he gets the full reward and it's multiplied due to his sincerity and devotion and taqwa and his mujahada. And a person performs salah and he receives 10th of the reward, or 9th, or 8th, or 7th, and 6th. And the hadith, what does it mention? Sometimes a person performs namaz and his namaz is thrown back at his face like a dirty rag because of the way he has disrespected or dishonored the specific and divine status of salah. Our maktab teaching is like this. I am teaching for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I need to ensure that my teaching, my niyat, my strategy, my commitment is on the most ahsan level possible. That's why we have husn tartib. Whatever we do, the tartib has to be correct, has to be right, within the boundaries of the Sharia. And husn tadbir. Okay, we can't be doing things and then we're falling foul of risk assessments. We haven't got our fire drill in place. Okay, we don't know what our safeguarding policy is. We ask the staff and nobody knows who the safeguarding lead is. No. Tadbir, the whole framework that's going to safeguard our maktab and our deen and allow us to continue teaching the deen, that framework has to be sound and has to be solid. So resources and policies, all this is something which is going to need thought. So three things form the fundamental principles of our spiritual development, and that is the niyyah, the tartib, and the tadbir. Even when we're teaching the kids, resources and policies is an example, but we teach the children with husn tadbir, with hikmah, with wisdom, with politeness. And there's a whole strategy for this. There's a whole training that goes behind behavior management and what are some of the more kind of practical and simple things that Ustad can do to engage students. So we move on to the next slide, and this is a bit more practical in terms of, so what do you want to achieve? I'm not sure, Maulana, if your staff has been exposed to the kitab that's recently been printed by Maktab Lajpuri.
No, what's the name?
Okay, so what I'll do, I'll send it to you on a WhatsApp, inshallah, and then you can forward to your staff. The purpose is called The Purpose of Makatib and Madaris. What Mullah has done in that, he's spoken about what the purpose of maktabs and madrasas are. I once went to see Mufti Musa Badad Sahab, and I asked him, that Mufti Sahab, he's the Khalifa of Mufti Mahmud Hassan Gangohi Rahmatullah alayhi, and I asked him, I said, Mufti Sahab, you know, we teach in maktab and we put a lot of energy behind it, but what should the end goal be? What should the end goal be? And the things on this slide is the feedback that Mufti Sahab gave. And he said, Dekho, he goes, the first thing is that we should ensure that every day that the children are getting something from this slide. Either the aqaid is being rectified, or the amal is being rectified, or the character is being rectified, or they are becoming people of da'wat and dua. Dua that they've learned at home is going to the house. The story they've learned at madrasa is going to the house. The dua they've learned in maktab is going to the house. The akhlaq that they are learning in maktab is going to the house. So they're becoming da'is of whatever they are learning, and they become people of dua. And this has to be practiced in the maktab. Okay, so for example, in our syllabus or timetable, sorry, we allocate the first 5 minutes for zikr. So all the students come in, and for the first 5 minutes, every class has to do zikr. And they have on the first Monday kalima, Tuesday Durood Sharif, whatever. So they have a routine. First 5 minutes is of zikr, or first few minutes is of collective dua. So the ustad and the students together will make a collective dua. Because what we've seen is we had it in the syllabus and the timetable and everything, but until we don't actually do it ourselves with the children struggle to actually encapsulate exactly what you're asking from them until we model it for them. So every day when I set my lesson plan, when I'm teaching my Islamic studies, diniyat, memorization, on the back of my mind, I should have this picture that from these 4 items, there's something that I want my children to take away. Either the aqaid is being rectified, or the amal is being rectified, or the akhlaq is being rectified, or whatever we are giving to them, they're becoming da'is of it and making dua for it. So this is, inshallah, the framework for any lesson plan. Any lesson plan that we have, inshallah, if we fit it into this criteria, inshallah, we will find that lesson plan to be fruitful. And we know that the purpose that we set out in terms of these maktabs and why these maktabs are there for, that we are achieving those goals. Otherwise, what happens, we do get lost in grades and marking and exams and assessments and assemblies and jalsas and all that happens, but sometimes we lose focus of the maqasid, and we should never lose focus of the maqasid of a maktab. The next slide talks about the culture that the children should be able to leave the maktab with. So the children should know that I'm coming to maktab for the sake of Allah. Because let's face it, the reality is the children come to maktab with no niyat. They come because mum says, because dad said. They come because everybody else is coming. They come because it's come routine and norm. Okay? So we need to instill within the children that, beta, you are coming to maktab for who? And this needs to be repeated every week, once or twice. Okay, children, why are we coming to maktab for? We are coming for the sake of Allah. Okay, so even if the children are repeating this, even that will have its effect, inshallah. And then at the back of it, 3 things we want to achieve in the hearts of these children. When they come into maktab, they should be loving the deen, loving the people of deen, and loving the places of deen. So they come into maktab happy. They are leaving maktab happy. And 20 years down the line, when they see their maktab ustad on the street, they can come up to you and say, Assalamu alaikum ustadji. They know that you were their muhsin. You were somebody who looked out for them, somebody who helped them and supported them, somebody who really gave a bother about them. Because the reality is, parents are coming to us and saying, Mauli Sahab, bacche humse nahi sambhalte, aap sambhalo. So the whole structure of parenting, unfortunately, is failing miserably. So we as teachers are not just ustads, but we are also the parents. We have to play a dual role. We have to play the role of being an ustad and also play the role of being the father and mother. What did you have for breakfast today? What did you eat before you came to maktab? Are the children eating healthy? Are they dressing well? Do they have a timetable in place? We have to be the teacher, the ustad, and also play a role in parenting within the boundaries of safeguarding. So the children, they are coming to maktab, they're loving the experience, they enjoy being with the ustad, and they enjoy learning the deen. It's something which is empowering them. And that's why there needs to be tons of praise and atoms amount of reprimand, if any. This is why, the ulama, when they write, this is what they say, that when it comes to principling somebody or disciplining somebody, you mention 100 of their good virtues, and then you address the concern. And the same goes with the students and amongst us as ustads and staff. And the last slide, I believe, is the after we've talked about the purpose and what we want to achieve and the culture we want to achieve and the importance of the syllabus and how the syllabus needs to be set out in terms of what it needs to really cover. One thing is that we need to, any business, it looks at its end goal. What is my end product? What's my best sample? Car showroom, a company that's creating, confectionery products. It looks at its end product. What do I want to achieve? What is my end product? So we as ustads need to ask the question that when a child comes to our maktab at the age of 5 or 4, and then they leave at the age of 13, what does our end product look like? We can say, mashallah, this student is from our maktab. Why? He praises salah. He knows the importance of halal and haram. He knows and can define Muslim identity. We know he has the tools to keep his iman safe. Maybe this is something that we can't measure. Ruhaniyat is something which is difficult to measure. But the fact that this child is able to keep connected with his deen and stay connected with the ulama and the places of deen, this is a sign that our maktab is successful. If the child is leaving the maktab, but he's connected with the masjid, with the people of the masjid, with the people of deen, that's a sign that we have been successful in our teaching of the maktab. And this is where the focus needs to be. So if we can define what our end product should look like, we can then begin to work backwards and frame our systems and our minds and our du'as in such a way that we are always making du'a for the end product. Ya Allah, our students, my class. We need to make du'a and make du'a for the students in our class and the students of the maktab by their name, and make du'a that Ya Allah, allow them to achieve this goal that we have set out for them and for ourselves. So these were just a few thoughts that I wanted to share with you on the request of Maulana. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first of all give me the tawfiq to implement this inshallah and allow us to take khair from this and take that which is beneficial.